Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm gonna show you my round 6 game from the Croatian League. This was played 2 days after the last round of the Zagreb Cup. So if you've seen my previous video, you'll know that my team and I have managed to win the Zagreb Cup and qualify for the finals of the Croatian Cup, which has already been played. I'm going to show you the games starting tomorrow, basically. So I was feeling very confident going into this game, and I played an opponent I didn't know I was going to be facing. I was expecting somebody else, had absolutely no prep for him, and I decided to go d4 and just see what happens. I mean, I have no prep, and d4 is what I feel most confident with when I have no prep. We got into a King's Indian, and this game was extremely interesting because there were 2 weaknesses in my opponent's position, and they weren't easy to get to. And it was very hard to break through. This is a typical King's Indian position that results from passive play by black. Okay, bishop to g7, e4, d6, very standard stuff. I went for my semi-averbakh idea. I don't really play the main lines against the King's Indian. I play the setup without knight f3 so that I can keep control over the g4 square and push my pawns on the king's side. I feel like attacking the King's Indian players is the best way to go about facing the King's Indian, because they like attacking, so if you attack them, they will feel uncomfortable. My opponent was well prepared. He played the main ideas. So a5, the idea is to get the knight to c5 and prevent b4. And then if white castles queenside, go a4, a3, undermine things with a4, a3, f5, open up the bishop, and checkmate. That's black's plan. My plan is to checkmate black before that happens. Okay, knight a6, g5, chasing the knight away. It cannot go to h5 because I take twice. Knight d7, what was played in the game, is more common than knight e8, but both are possible. And now h4. The reason I played h4 was not only to play h5, but also if f5 comes, I don't want to take. So when f4 comes, on f5 I would play f3, and if f4 comes, I'm defending my g-pawn. Now it's defended. Knight d to c5 was played. Whoa, let me just turn off the variation arrows. And I can play this position 2 different ways. I can play the best engine move that prevents f5, or I can play f3, which is what I played. Knight f3 is the best move, and I know this position, but I chose not to play knight f3. f3 is only slightly worse, but the idea is different. The idea is having an attacking position where the f-file is blocked up and I have more security for my king and an easier attack. If knight f3, f5 simply doesn't work because I take, and let's say queen takes, I go h5, and it's just, black is going to collapse very quickly. So not f5. But against f3, f5 is definitely the best move. And as I said, I played h4 to make sure f4 doesn't win my g-pawn, so now I can just continue my normal development. So I played knight h3. My knight wants to go to f2. The bishop is going to go to g1 to make sure the knight still has a square. f4, bishop g1. The engine wants to take on c5, and that's only slightly better. Bishop g1 is perfectly fine. And here my opponent surprised me. He took on h3. I mean, I understand the decision to take. It seems kind of scary to allow knight f2, knight g4, but he can take it when it gets to g4. And it also seems scary to allow knight f2, knight d3, which would basically force your only 2 good pieces out of the game. In this structure, I'm simply playing against the bishop. If we trade everything off and my opponent is left with that bishop, I'm going to be strategically significantly better. And of course, my goal will then be to trade off my light squared bishop. So bishop h3 is definitely a dubious decision, simply because I can now go bishop f1, bishop h3, and look at this bishop. It looks at g4, f5, e6, d7. This is going to be the key piece that decides the game. So I took with the rook, and here my opponent played a very, very surprising move. I mean, his move is something I would never expect. If you ask me to guess black's move, this wouldn't be my guess in 20 tries. So probably his plan should be to get the king away from there before I manage to play rook h2 or rook h1, bishop f1, bishop h3. So if you can tuck your king away on the queen side, there's no way for me to open it up. And basically you have a bad piece, but there's no attack. He played h6. And of course, if I allow h5, I'm never going to win. There's just no way to break through. So I took. Okay, bishop takes and queen d2. I want to castle queenside, want to get my queen in there. g6 is extremely weak. He played king h7, I castled queenside, and I was really confident now. There's a permanent weakness on g6. I'm going to reroute my bishop to h3, and the only thing I don't want to do is play h5, which would allow g5 to block the position. Other than that, I think my plan is fairly simple. Queen d7 attacks the rook, rook h2. Knight a4. Now knight a4 is a big mistake. The engine plays knight b5 and says white is almost +2, almost winning. I did not consider knight b5 at all, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. The engine just doesn't want to trade knights, and you can then play b3 or queen c2 to trade to force the knight back. I played king b1, allowing knight c3. And after queen c3, my opponent played b6. The idea is knight c5, and if I take, he takes with the b pawn, and also defending a5. I played bishop f1. I want my bishop on h3. He played queen a4. And now I think this was my longest think of the game. I didn't know whether I should trade queens or not. The engine plays rook c1 and doesn't trade queens. But I thought I would have a huge advantage simply because there's a weakness on g6. And my bishop dominates his knight, and I have ideas like bishop h3, bishop d7, bishop b5, where he basically cannot move anything on the queen side, and I can build up pressure on the king side. So I played queen c2, which is okay. This is about +1, and rook c1 is about +1.3. He doesn't really have an easy way to decline this trade. I don't think so. If he plays something like queen d7, bishop h3 is coming. If queen e8, bishop h3 anyway. And with the queens on the board, it's going to be much easier for me to attack g6. So he trades. I take with the king. He played bishop g7. I played bishop h3. And look at this bishop. And look at this one. It's a completely useless piece. It's doing some defending around the king, but it cannot really help defend g6. Bishop f6. I need to save my bishop, so my pawn, so bishop f2. King h6, king c3. I want to go b3, a3, b4. That's my plan. I want to maybe play along the a file, maybe play along the g file, and I still haven't decided. I wanted to play flexible moves. b3, king h5, bishop g4 check, king h6, and here I played rook g1. The engine wants to go bishop d7, bishop b5 anyway. Immediately, sorry. But I saw this idea, but I wasn't really convinced that it did anything. So I didn't play it. Rook g1. Okay, rook g7 wants to double up the rooks. Rook g2, I'm doubling up too. Knight c5, I'm not gonna take, so a3. Preparing to evict the knight with b4, and I think I have more space in the center. I definitely have a better position on the king side, and I have a better position on the queen side because I'm gonna go b4. He played bishop e7, and from here he didn't really do anything. He shuffled his pieces around, and that's understandable. Your pawn structure is completely locked. You cannot go a4 because that allows b4 and creates a weakness on a4. And if this pawn reaches a4, then bishop d7 can be deadly. You cannot go c6, you cannot go g5, so there are no pawn breaks for black and no way to open up the position. So I'm the one who's going to have to win this game. Bishop h3, king h5. Bishop f5, the bishop cannot be taken. So it's a triple attack now, forcing rook g8, b4, chasing the knight away. The knight cannot go to a4. So knight b7, bishop e6, moving the rook away. And now king b3. My plan is to play king a4, king b5, king c6, and there isn't that much that can be done about that other than knight d8, but then the knight is just useless on d8. King h6, bishop g4, rook a8, rook h1. Again, the engine wants to play bishop d7, bishop b5, and here my opponent played a4. And after a4, this now becomes much easier, because when I move my king, the rook is going to be tied down to defending this pawn. If I win this pawn, I have a passed pawn. So now there are two weaknesses. And this is what made the game even more interesting. So my opponent played rook h8, and I think I could have won straight away, but I just didn't see this. I thought if bishop d7, he just plays rook a8, which is true. The best move is rook g8. If rook a8, I go rook hg1 and good luck defending. In this position, let's say a random move. Let's say bishop f6. I can just go bishop c6, and what now? Let's say rook b7, defending everything. Bishop e8. I didn't see this. This is a very complicated way to win one of the pawns. I didn't even consider that. I saw bishop d7, of course, but I just thought rook a8. So I played rook gg1. And it was better to play rook hg1 to stay on g6, but I wanted to shuffle my rooks to the c file and break through with c5. That seemed reasonable because c7 is weak. So rook gg1, rook a8, rook c1, rook b8, rook c2, bishop f8, bishop e1. Again, in this position, I was considering bishop c3, where c5 is much stronger because d takes c5 would lead to bishop e5, a total collapse of the black position. So rook f7, bishop h3. Now I was even considering moving my bishop to c4 or to b5. Rook h7, rook g1. I'm not in a hurry. I had more time on the clock and I was just trying to break through somehow. Rook d8, bishop e6, king h7. And yeah, so in this position, my opponent needs to play safe moves that don't do anything, like rook a8. And I had decided on a plan here. I was going to infiltrate on the light squares with my king, get my king somewhere like g4, and try to make progress that way. And also play bishop f2, get my rooks to the c file again, and break through with c5. That would have been my breakthrough if nothing else happens. Alternatively, I can always play bishop f2 and bishop h3, bishop f1, bishop d3, bishop c2 to lock one of the rooks, because one of the rooks would then have to stay on a8 defending. And yeah, then if knight c5, take on c5. So that was another idea. But my opponent fell for a tactical trick that I've been setting up the entire game. He played king h7, and this is white to play and win. You can pause the video if you need to. It's not hard. It's just an easily winning position. The king is now lined up with the f5 square, so rook takes g6, and that's the end of the game. I mean, there's just no defense. Now I have a passed h-pawn. The rook cannot be taken. If it's taken, bishop f5. So my opponent played rook e8, bishop f5 anyway. King h8, h5 of course. Rook takes, he played knight d8, and I played bishop h4, and now the bishop's coming to f6. And yeah, that's going to be mate. He played knight f7, bishop f6 check, king h7, rook g7, and here he resigned. This is mate in 4. On king h8, rook anywhere along the g file, and bishop g7 is the only move, and that I take the bishop, then I take the knight. It's over. So yeah, I think this wasn't an easy game to win. I made several moves which didn't do much, and I was shuffling my pieces, trying to find the best way to target both weaknesses. When I had the one chance to do it, I missed it. And I actually wonder what would have happened had my opponent not played king h7, blundering the game away in a single move. It would have been interesting, definitely. I had more time on the clock, and I think I would have broken through because I have b5 and c5 as ideas, and the a4 pawn is weak. So if you can imagine, let's say, my king on b4, for example, if the knight is too far away, and my bishop on c2, my pawn on b5, then I just win the pawn on a4. So there were ways to break through. So this was the last league game in the spring part of the season. The Croatian League will continue in September, and that's going to be the first over-the-board games I'm going to be playing. Round 7 is on September 15th, and then there are 2 more rounds in September. I hope you liked the game. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye!